My husband, his mother, and his mistress flew off to Dubai, laughing as they said, "Only family gets to travel. You stay home, you brainless chicken." I said nothing and left quietly. When they finally came back, my mother-in-law handed me a folder. Documents for a loan worth $5 million, all taken out under my name. I just smiled, laughed softly, and showed her something that made her faint on the spot. Hello, dear friends. Please tell us in the comments which city or country you're watching from. It's always interesting to see where our viewers are. Enjoy the story. Emily Carter woke before dawn, the way she always did. The house was quiet. Cold winter light seeped through the blinds of their suburban Chicago townhouse. She moved carefully, not wanting to wake Ryan. Coffee first, always coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, sharp, grounding, familiar. It was her ritual before the day's noise began. Emily worked as a senior financial analyst at Atlas Financial Group, a mid-size investment firm downtown. 8 years climbing the ladder, promotions, long nights, tight deadlines. Her salary was higher than Ryan's, something that had quietly poisoned their marriage. By the time the kettle clicked off, she was already thinking about the numbers waiting on her laptop. But under those thoughts was something darker, an echo of last night's discovery. Her mother-in-law, Margaret, had been on the phone. Emily had caught only fragments: loan, signature, 500,000, and then, "Don't worry, she won't notice." Emily hadn't slept since. She lay awake beside Ryan, pretending, listening to his slow, steady breathing. When dawn came, she stopped pretending. At 6:45, she dressed in her usual armor. Black suit, white blouse, hair tied neatly. Margaret had called her cold for it once. "Men like softness, dear," she'd said, sipping her tea. Emily hadn't answered. She'd learned silence hurt more than any argument. By 7, she stepped outside. Frost bit her face. Her breath hung in the air. The world was gray and still. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the train. 20 minutes to the loop, 10 more to the office. Routine, order, control, the illusion of safety. Inside the crowded train car, faces blurred into the same tired expression. Emily stared out the window, mind replaying every detail of that overheard call. Margaret's voice, calm and confident. Her own name mentioned more than once. And that number, $500,000. A loan that could destroy her. Margaret had always been difficult, the kind of mother who believed no woman would ever be good enough for her son. From the very beginning, she had tested Emily. At their first dinner, Margaret had asked where Emily's family was from, how much she made, whether she owned her apartment. Every question disguised as polite interest, every smile a blade. Back then, Ryan had told her not to take it personally. "She's just protective," he'd said. "You'll grow on her." Emily had believed him. That was 8 years ago. Now Margaret lived with them, her temporary arrangement that had stretched into years. She ruled the kitchen, criticized Emily's work clothes, and inserted herself into every decision, from furniture to vacations. Ryan rarely took his wife's side. "She means well," he'd say. "Just let her talk." Emily used to argue. Then she stopped. Arguing meant nothing when two people shared the same enemy. When she arrived at the office, the elevator mirrors reflected a calm, professional woman. No one would guess she'd spent the night building a mental timeline of possible fraud. She opened her laptop, forced her mind into work mode. Market reports, client portfolios, risk analysis. Numbers were simple. People were not. At noon, her phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. "Mom says hi, don't forget dinner tonight." She stared at the message. Her thumb hovered, then typed back, "Sure." Dinner. That meant another evening of Margaret's little remarks disguised as jokes. "Ryan works so hard, doesn't he? You're lucky to have him." Or, "I could never let my husband come home to take out." Emily knew the routine. Smile, nod, survive. But tonight would be different. When she got home, she'd start gathering proof. Bank records, copies of IDs, anything Margaret could have touched. If what she'd heard was real, then Margaret wasn't just a bitter woman. She was a criminal. And if Ryan was part of it, if her own husband helped forge her signature, then this wasn't marriage anymore. It was war. Outside, snow began to fall again. Emily watched the flakes drift past the window, quiet and innocent. In her mind, she repeated a single line, steady as a heartbeat. "They think I won't notice. They're wrong." Emily got home after dark. The townhouse was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater and the occasional groan of the old pipes. Margaret's shoes were by the door. She was home. Ryan's jacket, too. She dropped her bag, slipped off her heels, and moved toward the kitchen. Laughter came from inside. 2 voices, Margaret's and Ryan's, low, intimate, comfortable. The kind of tone people use when they share a secret. Emily paused in the hallway. She wasn't ready to face them, not yet. Instead, she stepped into the small office and closed the door. Her laptop blinked awake. She opened her online banking account, scrolled through every transaction, every statement. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Her name was clean, her credit untouched. If Margaret really planned to file a loan in her name, there would be paperwork, drafts, copies, signatures, somewhere in this house. Emily took a deep breath and left the office. The laughter from the kitchen had stopped. She could hear the TV now, news murmuring about politics and storms. Margaret was talking again, voice sharp as ever. "Ryan, if she doesn't appreciate you, someone else will. Men need to feel respected." Emily turned into the hallway before she could hear the reply. She entered the guest room, Margaret's room, when she knew the older woman was occupied. The air smelled of expensive perfume and disinfectant. Everything was perfectly arranged. Folded sweaters, lined-up cosmetics, stacks of neatly labeled folders. Emily opened the top drawer of the desk. Bills, grocery lists, and at the bottom, a thin blue folder marked Documents. Inside, photocopies of passports, tax forms, even Emily's own pay stub. Her breath caught. One paper had her signature, or what looked like it, except it wasn't hers. The strokes were perfect, almost mechanical. Margaret had practiced. Emily photographed every page, hands trembling only slightly. She closed the folder, returned everything exactly as it was, and slipped out of the room. In the living room, Ryan looked up from the couch. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired," she said. He nodded, eyes already back on the TV. The silence between them was wide and heavy. Later that night, when he fell asleep, she opened her phone again. This time not for banking, but for evidence. She downloaded a voice recorder app, one that would activate automatically whenever it detected conversation. She named the file folder Project M. At 1 a.m., she placed her phone under the living room shelf, near where Margaret liked to sit in the mornings. Then she went back to bed and stared at the ceiling. The next day, Emily worked from home. She told her boss she had a migraine, then sat silently in her office, listening through wireless earbuds. Margaret's voice filled the feed, clear, crisp, confident. "The copies are done. The notary won't ask questions. Ryan's friend will handle the rest. We'll have the money before she even notices." Emily's pulse quickened. Ryan's friend? Notary? This wasn't gossip. It was conspiracy. Margaret laughed softly. "By the time she figures it out, we'll be long gone. Maybe Florida this time. I've had enough of this snow." Ryan's voice joined in, low but distinct. "Just make sure the documents look real. She's too smart to fall for anything sloppy." "Oh, don't worry, sweetheart," Margaret said. "I've been practicing her signature for weeks." Emily's hand clenched around her pen. Weeks. They'd planned this for weeks while she worked late nights paying bills for the house they all shared. She stopped the recording and saved the file twice, once on her phone, once in the cloud. Then she sent a short message to the only person she trusted, David, her old college friend and corporate attorney. "Need to talk, urgent, fraud-related." His reply came within minutes. "Meet me tomorrow, 8 a.m. downtown. Bring everything." That night, Ryan came home late. His breath smelled like whiskey and perfume that wasn't hers. "Long day?" Emily asked. "Client dinner," he muttered. You could have called. Didn't think you'd care." She turned away so he wouldn't see the look on her face. Not hurt, not fear, just cold clarity. "I care," she said quietly. "Just not in the way I used to." Ryan didn't answer. When the lights went out, Emily lay awake again, watching the faint reflections of passing cars move across the ceiling. She'd spent years analyzing numbers, predicting risks, finding patterns. Now she saw the pattern in her own life. Betrayal hidden behind familiarity, deceit disguised as love. Tomorrow she'd meet David. Tomorrow the game would change. For now, she whispered into the dark, "You wanted to use me. Now you'll see what happens when I start counting." The cafe was nearly empty when Emily arrived. The air smelled of burnt espresso and wet wool. David sat in a corner booth, his laptop open, a black coffee cooling beside it. He'd always been composed. Law school had trained that into him. But when Emily slid into the seat opposite, his calm expression faltered. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I haven't," she replied. "And I think my husband and his mother are trying to commit loan fraud in my name." That made him blink. She laid her phone on the table, pressed play. Margaret's voice filled the space between them, matter of fact, confident, almost cheerful. "We'll have the money before she even notices." David listened in silence. When the recording ended, he leaned back, tapping the table once. "That's not gossip," he said. "That's a conspiracy." Emily pulled out the photos she'd taken, forged signatures, copied IDs, fake documents. David scanned them, nodding slowly. "You have evidence, but we need more. Context, dates, any proof Ryan's directly involved. If this goes to court, his lawyer will say you made it up out of spite." "He's cheating too," she said. "Different perfume, late nights, lies about meetings." "Then we'll find her. Every extra thread helps." He outlined a plan with lawyer's precision. Step 1. Secure all personal accounts, change passwords, enable two-factor authentication. Step 2. Order a credit freeze through the national bureaus, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. Step 3. Build a timeline linking every piece of evidence. "Once they file the loan," David said, "we file the case. Police first, then civil claim. You'll be covered before they see it coming." Emily exhaled for the first time in days. There was something about structure, numbered steps, logical order, that steadied her. By afternoon, she'd completed every task on the list, her accounts locked, her digital footprint secured. That night, she hid a second recording device under the kitchen table, another near the entryway. The house had become a wiretap. At breakfast the next morning, Margaret sat reading the paper, pretending to be harmless. "You're up early," she said. "Work deadline," Emily answered. Ryan joined them, eyes on his phone. "You two never stop," Margaret sighed. "Emily's always chasing money. No wonder you're tired, honey." "At least one of us has to pay the bills," Emily said evenly. Margaret froze for a second, then smiled. That tight artificial smile she used before a verbal strike. "Careful, dear. You sound ungrateful." Emily just sipped her coffee. Silence settled again, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. When they left for the day, Emily checked her phone. The recorder had captured everything, and then some. At 10:15, while she was at work, Margaret's voice filled the feed again. "Ryan, she's suspicious." "No, she's just tired," he said. "Then we move faster. Lauren said the notary can do it tomorrow. We'll have the signatures, and the bank can release funds by next week." Lauren. The name locked in Emily's memory. Another accomplice. That evening, Emily met David again. She handed him the new audio. He listened, jaw tightening. "Perfect," he said. "Now we have conspiracy, intent, and timeline. All we need is the financial movement, the loan application itself." "They're planning it tomorrow," she said. "Then we're ready." He promised to contact a detective he knew in the city's financial crimes division. Emily thanked him, stood, and hesitated. "David, what if they find out?" "Then you call me before you say a word to them," he replied. "But honestly, I think they've underestimated you." When she got home, the house was dark. Margaret's bedroom door was closed, light flickering underneath. Ryan's voice drifted through it, low and tense. Emily couldn't hear words, only tone, worry, anger, control. She took her phone, slipped it under the door, and pressed record. Minutes later, the audio confirmed what she already knew. "She's checking things," Ryan said. "Then we finish tonight," Margaret hissed. "Lauren's ready. We send the forms now." Emily froze. They were acting faster than expected. The loan could be live before morning. She called David. "They're doing it now," she whispered. "Then go to the police," he said. "Right now. Bring the recordings. I'll meet you there." The night outside was brutal. Wind cutting through her coat, streets slick with sleet. Emily drove downtown in silence, the windshield wipers beating time against the rising panic in her chest. At the precinct, a detective named Ramirez took her statement. She played the recordings, showed the photos, described every step. Ramirez listened, expression hardening. "You did the right thing," he said finally. "If the loan hits the system, we'll flag it and freeze the funds. They won't get a cent." He looked up from the file. "You've got guts, Mrs. Carter. Most people wouldn't stand up to their own family." Emily managed a small, tired smile. They stopped being family the moment they started planning my ruin. When she walked back to her car, dawn was already touching the skyline. The city looked pale and brittle, like something that could shatter. But inside, Emily felt steady. For the first time, she wasn't reacting. She was leading. Tomorrow, they'd find out just how dangerous calm could be. By sunrise, Emily's statement was already logged. Detective Ramirez promised to alert the fraud division before the loan cleared any internal review. But Emily knew bureaucracy moved slowly. Margaret and Ryan didn't. When she got home, the air in the townhouse was thick, like something poisonous had settled overnight. Margaret was at the table, stirring her coffee with surgical precision. Ryan stood by the window, arms crossed, phone in hand. "Rough night?" Margaret asked without looking up. "You could say that," Emily replied. Margaret smirked. "Well, I'm glad one of us still gets sleep. Some of us have important things to plan." Emily poured herself a cup of coffee, pretending to ignore the jab. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from David. "Police confirmed, loan flagged. They can't withdraw anything. Stay calm." She took a slow sip, hiding her relief. Ryan turned to her, face unreadable. "You okay?" Emily nodded. "Perfectly fine." When he left for work, Margaret lingered, flipping through her planner. "You know, Emily, you might want to start being nicer. Gratitude goes a long way." "Gratitude for what?" Emily asked. "For being married to my son, of course. You're lucky he's patient." Emily smiled faintly. "You're right, he's patient. But patience has limits." Margaret's expression flickered. A tiny, uncertain pause. Emily saw it and knew. The old woman sensed something off but couldn't name it. By noon, Emily was back at her office downtown. Her co-workers were buried in spreadsheets. No one noticed that her hands trembled slightly as she logged into the bank's system. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her position gave her limited access, but she knew how to trace data trails. It took 10 minutes to find it. An application submitted the previous evening under her full name. Emily Carter. Loan request, $500,000. Purpose, property renovation. The digital signature was flawless. The bank's verification system had approved it. Except now, a red tag blinked beside it. Fraud alert. Identity verification under review. She took a screenshot and sent it to David. His reply came seconds later. "Excellent. They're caught in the act. We'll have proof of intent once the audit completes." For the first time in weeks, Emily exhaled without fear. She felt something close to power. That evening, she decided to act normal. No confrontation. Not yet. Let them think everything was fine. When she arrived home, the smell of garlic and butter filled the kitchen. Margaret's attempt at a family dinner. Ryan poured wine like nothing was wrong. "You seem quiet," he said, sliding her a glass. "Long day," Emily said. "Markets are crazy." Margaret gave a dry laugh. "Well, enjoy the calm while you can. Life changes fast." Emily met her gaze. "You have no idea." Dinner passed in brittle politeness. Ryan checked his phone every few minutes. Margaret talked too much about travel, how she'd always dreamed of white sand beaches, a place far from all this cold. Emily let her talk, memorizing every careless word. After dishes, she excused herself and walked to the bedroom. Once the door was closed, she called David on speaker. "They're pretending everything's fine," she said. "Good. That means they think it's working," he replied. "Tomorrow the police will contact the bank for a statement. Once that happens, the fraud will go public. You just need to stay quiet another 24 hours. What if they run? Then customs will stop them. Their passports are already flagged." Emily almost laughed, not from joy, but from disbelief at how fast control had shifted. Yesterday, she'd been the victim. Today, she was holding the wires of their own trap. When she hung up, she noticed Ryan's phone glowing on the dresser. A message preview flashed across the screen. Vanessa. "Flights booked. 2 weeks. Same hotel as before. Can't wait to be free of her." Emily stared at the name. The Mistress, finally revealed. Her mind sharpened. 2 weeks. A flight. Escape. She opened Ryan's calendar app, scanning quickly. One entry stood out. Vacation, 7 p.m. Friday, Miami. She smiled coldly. "Miami, huh? Fitting." The next day, Detective Ramirez called. "Mrs. Carter, the application was confirmed as fraudulent. The IP address traces back to your home. That's enough for a warrant." "When will you move?" "We'll wait until they try to leave the state. Easiest to arrest them at the airport." Emily nodded, voice steady. "I'll make sure they get there." Friday arrived gray and windy. Margaret was in her element, bustling through the house, packing suitcases, humming something smug. Ryan moved with rehearsed confidence, pretending everything was normal. "We'll be gone a couple weeks," he said casually. "You'll manage, right?" "Of course," Emily said, holding his gaze. "I always do." Margaret laughed. "Don't wait up for us, dear. Some of us have earned a little sunshine." Emily smiled. "Enjoy it while it lasts." When the door shut behind them, silence filled the house. She looked at the clock. 5:15 p.m. In 2 hours, their flight would board. She texted David one word: "Go." Then she sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Margaret had called her cold, ungrateful, unworthy. The house felt lighter already. At 7:42 p.m., her phone buzzed again. David's message read, "Arrested at O'Hare, both in custody. Fraud confirmed. Detective will brief you tomorrow." Emily set the phone down and stared out the window. Snow drifted through the streetlights, quiet and endless. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the silence. She owned it. Tomorrow would bring noise, headlines, hearings, paperwork. But tonight, there was only peace. And somewhere between that silence and the ticking clock, Emily allowed herself the smallest smile. They had planned a vacation. Instead, they got a one-way trip to justice. The next morning, the call came at 9. Detective Ramirez's voice was calm, but charged. "They're both in custody. We recovered the forged contracts, laptops, and correspondence with the bank. The evidence you gave us sealed it." Emily thanked him, then sat still for a long moment. The house was quiet again, too quiet. On the kitchen counter, Margaret's half-empty teacup stood exactly where she'd left it. Lipstick smudged the rim. The sight almost felt absurd. People capable of fraud shouldn't leave something so ordinary behind. She took the cup, rinsed it, and placed it upside down in the sink. Then she made herself a fresh coffee and opened her laptop. Work emails, spreadsheets, normal life still pulsing in another window, while her own story unraveled somewhere in police custody. At noon, David called. "The press may pick it up," he said. "White-collar arrests always draw attention. You might want to prepare a short statement for your company, something factual, emotionless." "I'll tell them the truth," she replied. Identity theft by relatives. Case under investigation. Exactly. Nothing more. By afternoon, the local news sites had already posted it. Suburban couple arrested in loan fraud plot. The article didn't name her, but the details were close enough. Her phone started buzzing. Texts from colleagues, concerned questions, a few polite silences that said more than words. That evening, she met David downtown. They sat in the same cafe where it had started. "They'll deny everything at first," he said. "Margaret's already claiming she was tricked by someone named Lauren." "Lauren exists," Emily said. "I've got her voice on tape." "Good. The DA will love that. The more airtight the story, the faster the plea deal." He studied her face. "You look calm." "I've been angry for too long," she said. "Calm feels better." She meant it. The fury that had burned through her for weeks had cooled into something stronger. Focus. At home that night, she opened the recordings again. Margaret's laughter, Ryan's muttered replies, the sound of her own footsteps in the background. Every second of it now cataloged, preserved. She transferred the files to a flash drive, labeled it Evidence A. Then she slid it into a safe deposit envelope for the police. 2 days later, she was called to testify for the formal complaint. The courthouse smelled of coffee and disinfectant, the same mix every government building seemed to share. She sat across from Detective Ramirez and an assistant prosecutor who kept typing without looking up. "Mrs. Carter, do you confirm this is your signature on the authentic document?" "Yes." "And this is the forged one?" "Yes, I never authorized that loan." "You also confirm this voice recording features your husband and mother-in-law?" "Correct." The questions lasted an hour. When it was over, Ramirez walked her to the door. "You handled this like a professional," he said. "I am a professional," she answered. That evening, she returned home to find an official envelope on the porch, a preliminary court notice. Ryan Carter and Margaret Carter, v. State of Illinois. Hearing scheduled in 3 weeks. She placed it on the counter and poured herself a glass of wine. For years, that house had felt like a cage. Now it was a witness box waiting to be cleared. Her parents called that night. They lived in Oregon, far away from the drama, but they had seen the news. "Honey, are you safe?" her mother asked. "Safe," Emily said. "Tired, but safe." "Do you need us to come?" "No, just knowing you're there is enough." After the call, she walked through each room of the townhouse. Margaret's perfume still lingered in the hallway, faint but persistent. Ryan's cologne on the jacket hanging by the door. She opened windows one by one, letting the cold January air sweep through. The sound of the wind was cleansing. Furniture creaked, papers fluttered, and for the first time the place smelled like nothing, no one. She spent the next week rebuilding normal life, work, gym, groceries. People watched her differently now, half admiration, half pity, but she didn't mind. Pity fades, respect stays. David updated her every couple of days. "They're cooperating now," he said. "Margaret admitted to forging your signature. Ryan claims she pressured him." "He'll say anything to save himself." "Maybe, but you have every recording. He won't escape entirely." On Friday, Emily was summoned to identify property from the investigation. In a sterile police storage room, she saw the evidence laid out. Margaret's blue folder, Ryan's laptop, the printed contracts, each item sealed in plastic, tagged with case numbers. She looked at the objects and felt nothing. No nostalgia, no grief, just confirmation. They had existed. They had tried. They had failed. When she left the station, the city was wrapped in pale sunlight. The snow had melted into thin silver puddles. She stopped at a small park near the river, sat on a bench, and closed her eyes. For weeks, her mind had been a ledger of risk and response, strategy and defense. Now, for a brief minute, it was blank. Then her phone buzzed. David again. "Good news," he said. "The DA plans to charge them formally next week. Once the plea is filed, you'll get restitution and the loan record wiped clean." "Thank you, David, for everything. You did the hard part. You faced them." Emily watched the water move past the frozen banks. She didn't feel victorious. Victory implied celebration. This was quieter, a balance restored. She stood, pulled her coat close, and started walking home. Ahead of her, streetlights flickered on, one by one. Behind her, the sun dipped below the skyline, and the city exhaled. For the first time in years, so did she. The courthouse hallway was cold, its marble floors echoing every step. Emily walked steadily, head high, folder in hand. Reporters clustered near the entrance, their microphones ready, flashes already searching for a face to attach to the story. "Mrs. Carter, did you know your husband was involved? Are you pressing charges against your family?" She didn't answer. Silence had power, and she had learned to wield it. Inside the courtroom, the world was smaller. Fluorescent light, wood paneling, the sharp scent of polish and coffee. Margaret sat at the defense table, wrapped in a beige sweater, her hair perfectly brushed as if presentation could erase crime. Ryan sat beside her, thinner now, pale, staring at the floor. Emily took her seat across from them. David leaned closer. "Just remember, calm and factual. The truth is already enough." She nodded. She didn't need theatrics. The judge entered. Everyone rose. State of Illinois versus Ryan Carter and Margaret Carter, case number 1049B. The prosecutor began. His voice was firm, clinical. He laid out the pattern. Forged documents, intercepted signatures, fraudulent accounts traced to their home IP. He played the recordings. Margaret's laughter, Ryan's quiet agreement. The sound filled the courtroom like static, uncomfortable and undeniable. Margaret didn't look at Emily. Ryan did. For the first time since his arrest, their eyes met. There was no hate in his face, only the hollow realization of a man who had bet everything on deceit and lost. When Emily was called to testify, the courtroom hushed. She walked to the stand, placed her hand on the oath card, and spoke clearly. "I do." The prosecutor guided her gently. "Mrs. Carter, when did you first realize your personal information had been misused?" "The night of January 15th. I overheard a phone call between my mother-in-law and an unknown accomplice discussing a loan under my name." "And what actions did you take?" "I documented everything. I collected recordings, photographed the forged papers, and filed an official report within 12 hours. "Why didn't you confront them directly?" "Because I needed proof. Emotion doesn't convict criminals. Evidence does." Her voice didn't shake. Every word landed clean, measured. Even the judge glanced up from his notes. When the defense attorney stood, the tone shifted. "Mrs. Carter, is it possible your husband acted under pressure from his mother, that he didn't fully understand what was happening?" "He signed fake contracts," Emily said evenly. "He knew." "But you admit your marriage had problems. Financial tension, emotional distance." "Yes. But problems don't justify fraud." A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. The lawyer frowned, shuffled papers, and sat down. The prosecutor finished his questions. No further examination. Emily returned to her seat beside David. He whispered, "Perfect." When the session adjourned, Margaret tried to stand but stumbled, clutching the edge of the table. Ryan caught her elbow. For a split second, Emily saw what they had once been. Not villains, just two small, fearful people who'd mistaken greed for survival. Then the bailiff moved them out of the room, and the illusion vanished. Outside, journalists swarmed again. David handled them with crisp deflection. "My client has no statement. Justice will take its course." They walked to the street together. Snow had begun again, fine and relentless. Emily looked up, the flakes dissolving on her eyelashes. "When will sentencing happen?" she asked. 2 weeks, David said. "The prosecutor's pushing for full terms. 6 years for her, 3 for him, maybe less with cooperation." "He'll cooperate. He always does, when it's too late." That evening, Emily went home to an emptier house than ever. No voices, no perfume, no pretense, just stillness. She made tea and sat on the couch, staring at the glow of the city through the window. Her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. A text. Ryan. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop her. I hope you find peace. She stared at the words for a long time, then deleted them without replying. Closure didn't come from their apologies. It came from her endurance. Over the next days, her life began to reassemble itself. Her firm offered a few weeks of leave, which she declined. Routine was the best therapy. She handled reports, trained interns, even laughed during meetings. People tiptoed around the subject, but she could feel a subtle shift in how they looked at her. Not pity now, but quiet respect. David checked in again after the verdict was announced. Margaret sentenced to 6 years in state prison, Ryan to 3, both ordered to pay restitution. It's over, he said simply. No, Emily replied. It's concluded. Over will take longer. That night, she packed a suitcase, not to escape, but to breathe. She booked a small coastal inn in Maine, off-season, quiet and gray. The next morning, she left before dawn. The ocean was brutal in February. Wind slicing through her coat, waves hammering the rocks. She stood on the shoreline, hair whipping across her face, and for the first time felt something that wasn't anger or strategy. It was relief, heavy and clean. She took out her phone, opened a new note, and typed one sentence. They tried to destroy me. I turned it into evidence. Then she saved it, slipped the phone into her pocket, and kept walking along the cold, endless edge of the sea. Tomorrow she'd go back home, back to work, back to normal life. But today belonged entirely to her. A day with no fear, no noise, no lies. Just freedom, paid in full. 3 months after the sentencing, spring reached Chicago late, but it came. The air lost its bitterness, the streets thawed, and for the first time in years, Emily felt warmth that wasn't forced. The city looked different now. Not kinder, just honest. Her firm had quietly promoted her to Vice President of Risk Strategy. The board cited her exceptional analytical judgment under pressure. They didn't mention the trial, but everyone knew. In a world built on trust and numbers, her survival had become a case study in composure. She adjusted quickly. Work filled the gaps that silence left. Mornings began early again. Coffee, train, spreadsheets, meetings. No drama, no crisis, just precision. Yet at night, when the city lights blurred outside her apartment window, she sometimes caught herself expecting a voice. Margaret's scorn, Ryan's excuses. The absence was strange, almost echoing. One Friday, David stopped by her office. He'd shaved the beard he always wore during stressful cases. "You're hard to reach now," he said. "That's the idea." He smiled. "I thought you'd vanish for good. Instead, you became executive material." "Crisis management experience," she said. "Personal and professional." He handed her a folder. The restitution payments cleared. Full amount. "You can close the case officially." Emily glanced at the papers, then pushed them aside. "I don't need the money." "Take it anyway," David said. "It's not payment. It's proof." That night, she went home and placed the documents in her safe. She didn't even open the envelope. Some victories didn't need counting. 2 weeks later, an email arrived from a business magazine. Subject line, "Feature request. Women in Finance, the Cost of Integrity." They wanted to profile her story. Anonymized but unmistakable. A tale of resilience, leadership, survival. David advised caution. "Media exposure can revive old noise," he said. "Are you sure you want that?" Emily thought about it. Maybe silence served its purpose, but telling the truth might serve someone else. She agreed to an interview under conditions. No family names, no photos from the trial, no personal addresses. Just facts, tone steady and professional. When the article came out, it circulated fast. A Chicago analyst outsmarts a family fraud scheme. The photo showed her standing near a window, the skyline behind her, expression unreadable. Comments poured in. Admiration, empathy, even outrage at the crime. Her inbox filled with messages from women across the country. Strangers wrote things like, "I left a man like that too," or "Your calm gave me courage." She read each one. Some she answered, some she didn't. But one letter stopped her. It came from a woman named Darlene Peterson, living in Ohio. "My son and his wife are planning something similar. I heard them talking about a loan in my name. I don't know what to do. I'm scared to confront them. Please tell me how you started." Emily sat staring at the words, the irony almost sharp enough to laugh. She thought of that winter night when she had texted David, desperate, alone. She typed back carefully, "Start by collecting proof. Facts win, fear loses. Do not argue, prepare. Once you have evidence, go to the police. You're stronger than you think." She pressed send and leaned back in her chair. Later that evening, she met David for dinner. He raised a glass. "You've become someone's hero." "Just a witness," she said. "That's more than most people ever are." They ate quietly, the conversation easy now. No strategy, no urgency. When he walked her to her car, he said, "You ever think about starting something with this? Consulting, maybe. Financial fraud prevention? Helping people spot the danger before it destroys them?" "Exactly." Emily didn't answer right away. The idea settled somewhere deep, practical and personal at once. The next morning, she opened a blank document on her laptop. Title: Carter Advisory. Personal Fraud Defense for Women. She outlined a concept: free webinars, checklists, legal partnerships. Nothing flashy, just accessible information for those who didn't know where to start. By afternoon, the draft plan filled 5 pages. She sent it to David with one line: "If we do this, we do it right." That evening, she stood on her balcony, watching the city fade into sunset. Below, traffic pulsed like a living heartbeat, constant, unstoppable. The skyline glowed gold, then blue, then silver. She realized something. For the first time in her adult life, no one else held any part of her story. It belonged entirely to her. Every failure, every scar, every rebuilt piece. The wind was warm for April, carrying the faint hum of the streets below. She closed her eyes and let it brush across her face. She didn't feel broken anymore. She felt designed. Her phone buzzed. A new email from David. "Let's build it. Together." Emily smiled, typed 2 words, and hit send. "Let's start." The city lights blinked like quiet applause, and somewhere in that rhythm, her future began again. Not as a survivor, but as the architect of her own peace. By summer, Carter Advisory existed beyond the screen. What had started as a late-night draft turned into an office on the 15th floor of a renovated building downtown. 2 desks, 1 coffee machine, and a mission statement taped to the wall. Truth is not fragile. David handled the legal framework. Emily built the strategy. They hired 1 assistant, a graduate student named Mia, who believed in everything with raw, impatient energy. Calls started coming within weeks. Women, retirees, small business owners, people too ashamed or scared to admit they had been deceived. Emily listened to each one with professional calm, but something in her voice made them stay on the line longer. She didn't promise justice. She promised clarity. Every morning she arrived before everyone else, opened the blinds, and watched the city below. For years, that skyline had symbolized pressure and survival. Now it looked like structure. Built, calculated, earned. One afternoon, while she reviewed a new client file, Mia knocked on the glass wall. "There's a journalist downstairs," she said. "He's writing a follow-up piece on you. Should I send him away?" "No," Emily said after a pause. "Send him in." The reporter was young, polite, too nervous for cynicism. "I'm doing a feature on post-trial resilience," he said. "How people turn trauma into work. You're sort of the model case." Emily offered him coffee and kept her tone neutral. "Trauma is only useful if it becomes a tool. Otherwise, it's just noise." He smiled. "That's a quote." After the interview, when he left, David appeared in the doorway. "You hate media attention," he said. "I do. but visibility protects what we're building. The next week, the article went viral. From victim to vanguard, the woman teaching America to outsmart financial predators. In 3 days, their inbox tripled. Emily didn't celebrate, but she printed one comment and pinned it to the wall. "I didn't think anyone would believe me. Then I found you." The growth was fast, almost frightening. Partnerships formed with community banks, legal clinics, women's shelters. Emily spoke at small conferences, avoiding personal questions, keeping her words sharp and spare. Each time she ended the talk with the same line: "No one ruins you without your permission." By autumn, she had almost forgotten what ordinary life without a plan felt like. Work was safety, logic was shelter. But one evening, after a long seminar at Northwestern, David walked her to her car and said, "You know you don't have to do this alone forever." She glanced at him. "I'm not alone. I have the company." "That's structure, not connection." "Same thing." He shook his head. "Not quite." She didn't answer, but the words stayed with her. Days later, while sorting emails, she found one from Ryan, prison correspondence. The subject line was blank. Against her better judgment, she opened it. "I read about what you're doing. You always were stronger than I knew. I'm sorry. Not to make peace, but because you deserved better from all of us. No request, no self-pity, just that." She stared at the screen, then deleted it. The act felt clean, final. That night, she stayed late in the office. The city lights pulsed below. Thunder rolled somewhere over the lake. She thought about David's words: connection, structure, trust. She wasn't sure she could tell the difference anymore. At 9, she packed her laptop, walked out into the rain, and took the long way home. The storm hit hard, streets shining, umbrellas snapping, yet she didn't rush. For once, she liked the unpredictability of it, the reminder that not everything needed control to feel alive. When she reached her building, David was waiting under the awning, soaked, holding 2 paper cups. "You left your notes," he said, "and I thought you might still be here." She took the cup, steam rising between them. "You could have just called." "You never answer after 8. She smiled. "Fair point." They stood in silence, rain hammering around them. The city noise faded, replaced by that steady rhythm. "You built something incredible," he said quietly. "Now maybe let it build you back." She looked at him. The exhaustion, the warmth, the unspoken patience that had followed her through the wreckage. "Maybe," she said. He handed her the second cup. "Hot chocolate, not coffee. You need sleep." For the first time, she laughed. Not politely, not controlled, but real. When she finally went upstairs, she placed the empty cup on the counter beside her old safe. Inside lay the evidence that had once defined her life: recordings, statements, signatures. She opened the safe, removed the envelope, and dropped it into the shred bin. The whirring sound was short, final. She whispered, "Enough." Through the window, the storm softened to drizzle. The city gleamed clean again. Tomorrow, she would meet new clients, answer new messages, maybe even have dinner with David without discussing work. But tonight, the world was simple. The sound of rain, the glow of the skyline, and the quiet certainty that she had rebuilt herself into something no betrayal could touch. Not the woman she was before, not the victim she became, but something rarer. The kind of person who learns to trust the world again, one decision at a time. And this time, the story was hers, from the first word to the last. By the start of the next year, Carter Advisory had grown faster than Emily ever expected. What began with 1 assistant and a coffee machine had become a full-scale operation with 10 employees, partnerships across 3 states, and a growing media presence. Her name now appeared in business magazines, legal panels, and podcasts about resilience. Fame had never been her goal, but it followed like a shadow. Every morning, her inbox flooded with news stories. People begging for help, victims describing betrayals that mirrored her own. Some messages were grateful, others desperate, a few strange and uncomfortably personal. Mia filtered most of them, but Emily read enough to feel the weight. She began to recognize the pattern. Tragedy, looking for a savior. During one Monday meeting, Mia brought in a stack of letters. "Half of these are thank yous," she said. "The rest are from people who think you can fix their entire lives." Emily sighed. "We can't save anyone. We give tools. They do the work. Try telling them that." By afternoon, the office buzzed with phone calls, papers, and small arguments over schedules. David stepped in, jacket off, sleeves rolled, still the same quiet balance to her precision. "You look exhausted," he said. "Success is just another kind of crisis," she replied. "Then you need new systems, and maybe sleep." He placed a folder on her desk. "We've been invited to speak at a national finance conference in New York. You'd be the keynote. It's good exposure." Emily frowned. "Exposure is how you get burned." "Or remembered?" he said. She thought about it that night. The invitation symbolized progress, but also risk. Attention could open doors, or turn her into a brand, stripped of privacy and nuance. She didn't want pity or admiration. She wanted effect. Still, David was right. Visibility protected their mission. She accepted. The conference hall in Manhattan was larger than she imagined. Glass walls, rows of polished chairs, hundreds of eyes. She wore a dark navy suit, simple, precise, no statement jewelry. When she walked on stage, the applause was polite but expectant. Her speech wasn't emotional. It was clean, deliberate, built around one idea. Prevention begins with awareness, not fear. She told them about the systems Carter Advisory had built, the statistics, the patterns of deception that repeated across demographics. She mentioned her past only once. "I learned the hard way that love and trust can be weaponized, but knowledge disarms the weapon." When she finished, the audience rose. Cameras flashed. The moderator smiled. "Ms. Carter, if you could give one piece of advice to anyone here, what would it be?" "Never let shame do the criminal's work for them," she said. The applause grew louder. Afterward, people swarmed her. Investors, reporters, even law enforcement officers wanting collaboration. She stayed polite but detached. Fame, she decided, was just noise with better lighting. Back in Chicago, her team greeted her like a returning general. "You went viral," Mia said, waving her phone. "That quote is everywhere." "Which one?" "The shame line. People are turning it into merch already." Emily rubbed her temples. "Perfect. Commercialized trauma." That night, she sat in her apartment scrolling through the posts. Hashtags, praise, commentary. Then she saw one account that stood out. "Expose the Truth Now," an anonymous page claiming she'd exaggerated her story for fame. They posted snippets of public records, photos from years ago, half-true details twisted for clicks. The comments section filled fast, defenders and skeptics clashing, strangers dissecting her life like evidence. She felt a cold, old anger rise but forced herself still. Panic was useless. Logic was armor. She forwarded the link to David. "They're coming after me online." His reply came minutes later. "We'll trace the account. Don't respond publicly. Silence again. It worked before." The next morning, Mia walked in holding her tablet. "It's spreading. But people are also defending you. One woman even posted her police report. Said you helped her file it." Emily looked up. "Then truth still travels faster than lies." By noon, David confirmed the source. The page came from a freelance journalist previously rejected from writing her biography. Bitter revenge disguised as truth. "We'll file a defamation claim if needed," he said. "No," Emily said. "Let it fade. Noise doesn't deserve spotlight." Within a week, it did fade. The internet moved on, as it always does. But the episode left a residue, a reminder that visibility meant vulnerability. For the first time since rebuilding her life, she felt something close to fear, not of loss, but of being misunderstood. She went for a long walk that evening along the river. The city glowed like liquid metal, lights rippling across the water. She stopped at the bridge where the air smelled faintly of rain and iron. In her mind, she replayed David's words, "Let it build you back." The truth was, she didn't know how to live without defense anymore. Every new face was a potential deception. Every compliment carried a hint of calculation. Yet part of her also knew she couldn't lead an organization about trust while staying barricaded behind her own walls. When she returned home, she found an envelope under her door. No return address. Inside was a single note. "You helped my sister. She got her money back. Thank you." No signature. Just that. She smiled faintly. Some truths didn't need names. The next day, she arrived at the office early. The sun was rising behind the skyline, gold light spilling through the windows. She stood there for a moment, breathing in the quiet, then whispered to herself, "Recognition isn't weight, it's direction." She opened her laptop, the day's work waiting. Another case, another story, another chance to turn pain into precision. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the structure and the strategy, a small spark of trust flickered back to life. Autumn returned to Chicago wrapped in rain. The skyline gleamed wet and silver, traffic humming below like static. Inside Carter Advisory, things had never looked better. New partnerships, grants, invitations from major institutions. Yet beneath the numbers, Emily felt a pressure she hadn't known even in crisis. Success demanding compromise. It began with a meeting request from Sterling Capital, one of the largest private finance groups in the country. The email came through David. They want to discuss a sponsorship program. Big money, national reach. Emily read it twice. Sterling Capital was known for aggressive lending and quiet scandals, the kind of firm that polished its reputation by attaching itself to moral causes. Still, she agreed to hear them. The meeting took place in a glass tower overlooking the river. The boardroom smelled of leather and citrus polish. 3 executives waited, smiles rehearsed, handshakes firm. The lead representative, a man named Alan Price, began with practiced sincerity. "Ms. Carter, your organization has changed the conversation around personal fraud. We believe our support could amplify that change. Imagine Carter Advisory centers across every major city, backed by sterling resources." David watched quietly from her side, expression unreadable. "What's the catch?" Emily asked. Alan chuckled softly. "No catch, just partnership. Of course, some of our policies would need alignment. We'd prefer you refrain from public criticism of corporate lending practices. It muddies messaging." There it was, the hook and silk. "You want to fund us," she said, "as long as I don't mention the kind of schemes your own clients use to trap people in debt." Alan's smile didn't falter. Perspective, not silence. Collaboration, not conflict. Emily closed the folder in front of her. "Then we're not aligned." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We're offering $8 million in the first year, Ms. Carter. Think about what that could do for your outreach." She stood. Money doesn't clean reputation. Truth does. The meeting ended quietly, but the air outside felt sharper, colder. In the elevator, David finally spoke. "You just turned down $8 million. "No," she said. "I turned down ownership. They don't want partners. They want shields." Back at the office, she gathered the team. Mia's eyes widened when she heard the story. $8 million? That's insane. "It would have bought control," Emily said, "and we don't sell that." Still, she saw doubt flicker across a few faces. Salaries, upgrades, expansion, all things she had promised when growth began. Declining Sterling's offer meant staying small for another year, maybe longer. That night, David stayed late with her. Papers covered the desk. The city glowed outside like distant fire. "You know, you could have played it differently," he said. "Take their money, use it on your terms. That's what everyone thinks before they get owned. And what if staying pure keeps you small? Then small will have to be enough." He nodded, quiet admiration beneath the fatigue. "You're consistent. Dangerous combination." The next morning, an email from Sterling's PR department arrived, polite, regretful, and laced with threat. We respect your decision, though we hope future statements about corporate responsibility remain balanced. Balanced. The corporate synonym for censored. By noon, a subtle smear campaign had begun. Online posts questioning Carter advisories, financial transparency, anonymous comments hinting at internal disputes. Nothing provable, just enough to stir doubt. Mia stormed into Emily's office with her tablet. "They're spreading garbage about us." "Good," Emily said calmly. "It means we mattered." She drafted a single statement for the website. Integrity is the only investment that never loses value. Within hours, it went viral. Clients, supporters, even journalists amplified it. Sterling's noise drowned under the weight of authenticity. Later that week, Emily received a letter, not email, a real one, handwritten on plain paper. "My daughter almost signed one of Sterling's loans. Your stand made her stop. Keep standing." No signature, no address, just gratitude. She pinned it beside the first thank you letter she'd ever received. That evening, she met David at a small restaurant by the river. The rain tapped against the windows, the city lights bending across the glass. "You know," he said, "most people would have taken the deal and slept fine. Most people confuse comfort with peace. And you don't? I've had comfort. It costs too much." He smiled, raising his glass. "To staying small and loud." She clinked his glass gently. "To being unbought." When she got home that night, the apartment felt different. Not empty, but light. She poured tea, sat by the window, and watched the storm slide across the skyline. Success wasn't safety, it was vigilance. The world would always test her boundaries, dress manipulation as opportunity. But for the first time, she knew her answer before the question came. She whispered to herself, steady and sure, "They took my name once. They'll never take my voice." Outside, lightning flashed, bright, brief, and clean. And in its light, Emily saw not the shadow of what she'd lost, but the outline of what she'd become. A woman who no longer needed power to feel powerful. Winter crept back quietly. The city lights dimmed early and frost crawled over the glass walls of Carter Advisory. Inside, the rhythm of work never slowed. Calls, reports, consultations. But Emily felt something changing beneath the surface. Not fatigue, something more personal and harder to manage. It began with a new client file on her desk, Case 47B, Sarah Monroe, alleged identity fraud committed by spouse. Emily skimmed the summary once, then again slower. Married 12 years, shared assets, husband applied for a mortgage under her name. Same methods, same betrayal, same tone of disbelief in the victim's recorded statement. He said it was temporary, just paperwork. The words hit like déjà vu. She closed the file but couldn't look away from it. When David entered a few minutes later, he noticed her stillness. "New case?" "Old ghost," she said. "Same pattern, different names." He leaned against her desk, studying her face. "You could assign it to someone else." "I can't. She deserves someone who understands. That someone doesn't have to relive it." "Maybe she does." He didn't argue further. That evening, Emily called Sarah Monroe. The woman's voice shook through the receiver, brittle with shame. "I feel stupid," Sarah said. "How could I not see it?" "You trusted someone you shouldn't," Emily answered. "That's not stupidity. That's humanity." There was a long silence, then the sound of quiet crying. Emily waited steady, the way someone once had waited for her. When the call ended, she sat in her office long after dark, watching her reflection in the window. The woman staring back didn't look broken anymore, just older, sharper, still learning how to live past survival. A knock on the door broke the quiet. David stood there holding 2 paper cups. "Dinner substitute," he said. "The usual." She smiled faintly. "You're predictable. Occupational hazard. Lawyers like patterns." They sat by the window, the city stretching beneath them. For a while, they spoke about cases, budgets, expansion. Then David grew quiet. "You know, Emily," he began slowly, "I've been trying to decide whether to say something, but you built a company on honesty, so I might as well follow the rules." She looked up, curious. "This sounds dangerous." "Probably." He exhaled. "I think I've fallen for you. Gradually, rationally, and completely." The room felt suddenly smaller, filled with unsaid things. Emily set her cup down carefully. "You know my history, David." "I do. That's why I didn't say anything until now. I wasn't waiting for an answer, just the truth. And what if I can't give you one yet? Then I'll wait until you can, or until you decide not to." She didn't speak. For once, analysis failed her. There were no strategies for this. The next few days passed in controlled normality, but every glance between them carried a new weight. At meetings, she caught herself noticing his voice, his steadiness, the quiet loyalty that had stood beside her since the worst days. It wasn't romantic tension. It was safety, threatening to become something more. One afternoon, while reviewing Sarah Monroe's case, Emily met the client in person. Sarah was thin, nervous, clutching a folder of documents. Her eyes were swollen but alert. "He forged my name on the mortgage," she said. "The bank thinks I'm complicit." "You're not," Emily assured her. "We'll prove it." "You sound sure." "I've seen it before." Sarah hesitated. "Did you ever forgive him?" The question hung heavy. Emily looked down at the papers, then met her eyes. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's the permission we give ourselves to stop bleeding. Sarah nodded slowly. "Then maybe one day." When the woman left, Emily sat motionless, that phrase echoing back toward herself. Permission to stop bleeding. She realized she'd been functioning, healing, succeeding, but never really allowing herself to rest. Every victory had been built on discipline, not peace. That evening, she walked to the river after work. The city air was sharp, the water reflecting the glow of passing cars. David called once, then again, but she didn't answer. She needed quiet. She watched her breath drift into the cold air and thought about what trust meant now. Not blind faith, not forgetting, just the courage to let the future in without demanding proof. When she returned home, she found a small note slipped under her door. David's handwriting. "Dinner tomorrow, no business talk. You deserve more than recovery. No pressure, no questions, just space." She smiled, folded the note, and set it on her nightstand. The next day, she met Sarah again to finalize her case. The evidence was strong, airtight. The woman looked lighter, as if holding a future again. When Sarah left, she hugged Emily briefly. "You helped me believe it's possible to start over." "It is," Emily said. "I'm still learning that too." That night, Emily showed up at the restaurant early. David was already there, 2 glasses of wine waiting. He stood when he saw her, that same quiet patience in his eyes. She sat down. "I don't know where this goes," she said. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But we'll figure it out." She lifted her glass. "To unfinished stories." He raised his. "To rewriting them." The sound of the toast was small, but it felt like something opening. A new chapter not defined by defense, but by choice. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and unthreatening. And for the first time in years, Emily let it. Spring returned with sudden warmth, melting the long Chicago winter into gray puddles and soft light. Carter Advisory hummed like a living thing. Calls, meetings, new clients, new hope. Yet inside the glass office, Emily had found a rare stillness. The storm that had once built her now simply moved around her. Sarah Monroe's case closed cleanly. The husband confessed, the fraudulent loan was canceled, and the woman left the courthouse free of debt and accusation. When Emily walked her out, Sarah said quietly, "I thought this would destroy me. Instead, it showed me who I was." Emily smiled. "Then you understand everything." Back in her office, she stood by the window watching the city pulse below. The same skyline she had once feared now looked like an ally. Its noise wasn't chaos anymore. It was movement, proof that life refused to stay still. That evening, Carter Advisory hosted its first open seminar. Journalists called it the Trust Project. People packed the hall, victims of scams, students, lawyers, single parents, survivors. Cameras lined the back wall. Emily took the stage with no script. She didn't need one. "When I was younger," she began, "I believed safety meant control. I built walls, made rules, measured every risk. But control doesn't save you, it just delays the truth. I was betrayed by people I loved. They took my name, my peace, my sense of reality. For a while, I thought survival meant never trusting again. But that's not freedom. That's fear wearing logic's mask." The room was silent except for the hum of the lights. You rebuild by learning to risk again. Not foolishly, but bravely. You learn to believe in facts and in people. You learn that forgiveness is not weakness and that justice is not revenge. Justice is balance. And you learn, she paused, eyes sweeping across the room, that your story is never over unless you decide it is. Applause rose like a tide. Some people stood, some cried quietly, some simply nodded. For the first time, Emily felt no separation between her and them. They were all living the same unfinished sentence. After the seminar, she slipped backstage. David was waiting with 2 cups of water and the same small smile that had carried through every chapter of her new life. "You didn't use notes," he said. "Didn't need them. You realize you just became the face of something much bigger than yourself." "Maybe, but I'd rather it stay about them." He looked at her for a long moment. "You've changed." "No," she said. "I just stopped running from the change." They walked out into the night together. The city glowed, washed clean by an early rain. The streets reflected light like calm water. "So," David said, "what comes next? Another branch? A book deal?" Emily laughed softly. "Maybe something simpler, a life." He grinned. "Complicated project. Worth the risk." They stopped near the bridge overlooking the river. The air smelled faintly of rain and lilac from the park across the street. She leaned on the railing, watching the current move beneath them. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to hate this city. Every corner reminded me of what broke me. And now it reminds me that I survived." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The contact felt strange at first, warm, real, unscripted, but she let it stay. For a long moment they stood without words, the rhythm of traffic below like a heartbeat keeping time. "Emily," David said finally, "I don't need promises, just honesty." She met his eyes. "Then here it is. I'm not afraid anymore." The simplicity of it felt like release. Days turned into weeks. The media moved on to new stories, but Carter Advisory thrived quietly. Clients came and went. Laws changed. Lives repaired themselves piece by piece. Emily taught workshops, wrote essays, and finally allowed herself to rest on weekends. One Saturday morning, sunlight filled her apartment. The safe where she'd once kept evidence now held travel brochures, postcards, and a half-finished book manuscript titled The Architecture of Trust. She poured coffee, opened her laptop, and wrote the closing line. "The opposite of betrayal isn't love. It's clarity." She read it twice, then smiled. When she looked out the window, the river shimmered gold. Somewhere beyond the skyline, the world still carried its chaos, its deception, its noise. But Emily had learned how to live above it, not untouched, but unshaken. Her phone buzzed, a text from David. "Breakfast or trouble?" She typed back, "Both." Outside, the city kept moving, unapologetic, imperfect, alive. Emily stepped into the light, coat over her arm, ready to meet the day. She wasn't the woman betrayed or the woman avenged. She was simply Emily Carter, The woman who turned survival into freedom and pain into purpose. And this time, she didn't need proof to trust the future. She was already living it. If this story moved you, like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.